At long last, this is last week's book called Translation of the Bones by Francesca Kay. I apologize again for not being with you last week. We went almost 6 days without power, but it's back now, so I'm really happy about that. Okay, so Translation of the Bones. Translation of the Bones is somewhat different from the other books I've reviewed. It is an intimate story of a small church community. Instead of being abstract or mostly theoretical like many of the other books that I've reviewed, Translation of the Bones is just about people struggling with who they are and who they are in relation to their faith. One of the best parts of this book is the way it opens. It starts with Mary Margaret, who has decided to clean the statue of Christ because it's dusty. But she doesn't want to use bleach or Windex, so she goes hunting for something more appropriate for the job. I love this part because I've always loved how funny it is when the mystical and profound rubs up against the practical details of reality. With what would you wash this sculpture of the body of Christ? Would Lysol and a paper towel really be appropriate? And it's this tiny observation that the statue is dusty, and then Mary Margaret's efforts to clean it in the most respectful manner that become the catalyst for the rest of the whole book. From there, the story moves from person to person, giving us snippets of their thoughts and experiences, so we not only know what Mary Margaret is thinking about, but also some of the parishioners, and even the pastor. We even get to see what Mary Margaret's mother is thinking about as she stares out the window all day. Despite all these different characters, there are no chapters in this book, and all of these sections are rather short, separated by only a few lines of space on the page. This makes for a text that's constantly in motion. And it also makes this a story that's decentralized, because it doesn't really belong to any one voice in particular. This works especially well for a text that focuses so much on religion, because belief is a tricky thing. Mary Margaret believes she's on a special mission from Christ, but some of the other characters in the book simply believe she's crazy, and it would be a little too easy for Kay to just side with one or the other. Forcing us into the middle ground is a little more difficult. Whether they're devout or not, everyone in this book struggles with the arbitrariness of reality. Why do some people die and others live? And what constitutes a miracle in the 21st century? Can you trust someone who says that God spoke to them directly? And in a story that takes place over Lent and Easter, another question takes shape as well. How do we find new ways to relate to the very old story of the Passion of Christ? Maybe that question seems trivial if you aren't religious, but I think it speaks to a bigger question about why we hold on to certain stories, and what kinds of stories we hold on to. Because everyone in the Translation of the Bones is telling a slightly different story, not just about Christ, but about themselves and the world around them. Being in the midst of all these stories can be overwhelming, but I came to think it was better than no story at all. That was Translation of the Bones, and thank you for your patience this week.